Today, the Great Reset, future state, current state. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, working latest post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. This is a deeply philosophical post today, and some will wonder what on earth is I'm on about. But sometimes I think it's important just to stand back and consider some of the so-called crazy ideas that are out there in the big wide world, or indeed online. And one of them that keeps coming up is the so-called Great Reset. So today we're going to have a bit of a look at the so-called Great Reset and try and understand where the concept has come from, what it might mean, and what the implications may be. And I should say before I start that everything I'm going to say is driven directly from publicly available sources. There is no speculation here. Everything I say is actually directly linked back to publicly available sources. Today I want to touch on what might be called the Twilight Zone, a series of ideas that have been floated by the likes of the International Monetary Fund and the World Economic Forum, which hint at how some are seeing the future for us playing out. In fact, the World Economic Forum is calling it a Great Reset publicly. I note the number of my followers have been suggesting that I've been playing the margin when I talk about the financialisation of property and the fact that from a banker's perspective, they look at the future cash flow from a household or a business or an individual and consider its value over the life of a relationship. Debt servicing is a critical thing, not debt repayment. Indeed, more broadly, consumer spending is currently the driving force of economic growth, and that may well be unsustainable. But people are now talking more and more about the need for a great reset following the observation that central bank QE has so far failed to turn economies around while the rich grow richer. And it's very likely that a global monetary reset will happen as a result, they say. The shape and timing of this, though, is uncertain. Indeed, the Great Reset was to have been the theme of a summit in January 2021, convened by the World Economic Forum. This twin summit was to have been both an in-person and virtual event connecting key global government and business leaders in Davos with a global multi-stakeholder network in 400 cities around the world for a forward-orientated dialogue driven by the younger generation. We only have one planet, and we know that climate change could be the next global disaster with even more dramatic consequences for humankind. We have to decarbonise the economy in the short window still remaining and bring our thinking and behaviour once more into harmony with nature, says Klaus Schwab, founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. A great reset is necessary to build a new social contract that honours the dignity of every human being, added Schwab. The global health crisis has laid bare the unsustainability of our old system in terms of social cohesion, the lack of equality, the lack of equal opportunities and inclusiveness, nor can we turn our backs on the evils of racism and discrimination. We need to build into our new social contract our intergenerational responsibility to ensure that we live up to the expectations of young people. COVID-19 has accelerated our transition into the age of the fourth industrial revolution. We have to make sure that the new technologies in the digital, biological, and physical world remain human-centric and serve society as a whole, providing everyone with fair access, he said. However, Adrian Monk, Managing Director at Public Engagement at the World Economic Forum, has said that the World Economic Forum has now decided to reschedule the annual meeting in 2021 in Davos to early next summer. The decision was not taken easily, since the need for global leaders to come together to design a common recovery path and shape the Great Reset in the post-COVID-19 era is so urgent. However, the advice from experts is that the forum cannot do so safely in January. So, during the week of 25th January, the forum will digitally convene high-level Davos dialogues, where key global leaders will share their views on the state of the world in 2021. But details concerning the dates and locations of the rescheduled annual meeting 2021 will be shared as soon as the forum is assured that all conditions are fulfilled to guarantee the health and safety of participants and the hosting community. And meantime, they said the forum continues to engage its partners and constituents in manifold collaborative activities to address global, regional and business challenges. But I want to highlight some of the ideas that are out there, because this whole concept of a global reset is, well, more complicated than it may first look. The first is the IMF's view that the current low interest rate quantitative easing will not provide sufficient momentum to turn our economic future around without a negative interest rate of somewhere between 3 and 4%, based on the fact that after the GFC, rates were cut on average by around 5%. To do that again, we have to go into negative rates. But then they go on to say that this will not be very effective if people are able to simply pull cash out of the banking system. So you would need to restrict cash transactions and force people to use the banks. Now, I discussed this last year when we explored the cash transaction ban, and that was despite the mainstream media claiming at the time that this was all tin foil hat stuff. But of course, now we know that we are close to zero following the RBA's recent cuts, and they are actually leaving the door ajar to go negative. And of course, this last week we heard that the cash transaction ban is probably shelved, at least for now. But the underlying logic is simple. First, keep cash in the banking system and then force people to spend their savings by either dropping rates below zero, so value is destroyed if you hold cash, anything to drive greater economic activity. And if you go to a fully digital currency, then this will be simple to police, control and manage. Indeed, you could have a digital currency which decays in value over time, or which incurs fees if held. This is more than an idle thought. This could happen, and in fact it was floated a couple of years ago at central bank meetings in the US. And the global elites have been at it again via the World Economic Forum, which of course claims to be the international organization for public-private cooperation. And they recently said there's an urgent need for global stakeholders to cooperate in simultaneously managing the direct consequences of the COVID-19 crisis to improve the state of the world. The World Economic Forum is starting the Great Reset initiative. The COVID-19 crisis and the political, economic and social disruptions it's caused is fundamentally challenging the traditional context for decision-making, they said. The inconsistencies, inadequacies and contradictions of multiple systems from health and finance to energy and education are more exposed than ever amidst a global context of concern for lives, livelihoods and the planet. Leaders find themselves at a historic crossroads, managing short-term pressures against medium and long-term uncertainties. As we enter a unique window of opportunity to shape the recovery, they said, this initiative will offer insights to help inform all those determining the future state of global relations, the direction of national economies, the priorities of societies, the nature of business models, and the management of a global commons. Drawing from the vision and vast expertise of the leaders engaged across the forum's communities, the Great Reset initiative has a set of dimensions to build a new social contract that honours the dignity of every human being. And the World Economic Forum has a partner program which they say are with world-class companies with a strong interest in developing systemic solutions to key challenges. They are, they say, the driving force behind forum programs. These include many financial services companies, big technology and consulting companies, and a range of other entities, but they are clearly at the big end of town. And they say that the forum engages the foremost political, business, cultural and other leaders of society to shape global, regional and industry agendas. And by the way, it was established back in 1971 as a not-for-profit foundation and is headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. It is independent, impartial and not tied to any special interest. The forum strives in all its efforts to demonstrate entrepreneurship in the global public interest while upholding the highest standards of governance. Moral and intellectual integrity is at the heart of everything it does. And their activities are shaped by a unique institutional culture founded on the stakeholder theory, which asserts that an organisation is accountable to all parts of society. The institution carefully blends and balances the best of many kinds of organisations from both the public and private sectors, international organisations and academic institutions. And they went on to say that we believe that progress happens by bringing together people from all walks of life who have the drive and the influence to make positive change. And indeed, to coincide with its 50th anniversary, the World Economic Forum previously launched a new Davos Manifesto, a set of ethical principles to guide companies in the age of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It was centred on what kind of capitalism do we want? That actually, they said, might be the defining question of our era. If we want to sustain our economic system for future generations, we must answer it correctly. Generally speaking, there are three models to choose from. The first is shareholder capitalism, which is embraced by most Western corporations, which holds that a corporation's primary goal should be to maximise its profits. The second model is state capitalism, which entrusts the government with setting the direction of the economy and has risen to prominence in many emerging markets, not least China. But compared to these two options, the third has the most to recommend it. They said stakeholder capitalism is a model first proposed a half a century ago and positions private corporations as trustees of society and is clearly the best response to today's social and environmental challenges. The change in direction, they say, is long overdue, and others are finally coming to the stakeholder table. The US Business Roundtable, America's most influential business lobby group, announced this year that it would formally embrace stakeholder capitalism, and so-called impact investing is rising to prominence as more investors look for ways to link environmental and societal benefits to financial returns. And they said we should seize this moment to ensure that stakeholder capitalism remains the new dominant model. To that end, the World Economic Forum released a new Davos Manifesto, which states that companies should pay their fair share of taxes, show zero tolerance for corruption, uphold human rights throughout their global supply chains, and advocate for a competitive level playing field, particularly in the platform economy. But to uphold the principles of stakeholder capitalism, companies will need new metrics. For starters, a new measure of shared value creation should include environmental, social, and governance, the ESG goals, as a complement to standard financial metrics. Fortunately, an initiative to develop a new standard along these lines is already underway, with support from the Big Four accounting firms and led by the chairman of the International Business Council. The second metric that needs to be adjusted is executive remuneration. Since the 1970s, executive pay has skyrocketed, mostly to align management decision-making with shareholder interests. In the new shareholder paradigm, salaries should instead align with the new measure of long-term shared value creation. And finally, they said large companies should understand that they themselves are major stakeholders in our common future. Clearly, all companies should still seek to harness their core competencies and maintain an entrepreneurial mindset, but they must also work with other stakeholders to improve the state of the world in which they're operating. In fact, this latter proviso should be their ultimate purpose. Now, this, of course, may all sound perfectly reasonable, but I wanted to highlight this in the context of something else which saw the light of day first in 2016 under the original title, Welcome to 2030, I Own Nothing, Have No Privacy, and Life Has Never Been Better. The piece was written by Ida Auken, Member of Parliament in the Parliament of Denmark. The original title caused such a stir that it was subsequently changed to Here's How Life Could Change in My City by the year 2030, and an author's note was added to try to diffuse the impact of the piece, which said, some people have read this blog as my utopia or dream of the future. It is not. It is a scenario showing where we could be heading for better or worse. I wrote this piece to start a discussion about some of the pros and cons of the current technological development. When we are dealing with the future, it is not enough to work with reports. We should start discussions in many new ways. This is the intention of the piece. Now, it's worth just going through this piece because it really does start some hairs running. Welcome, they say, to the year 2030. Welcome to my city, or should I say our city. I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. It might seem odd to you, but it makes perfect sense for us in this city. Everything you considered a product has now become a service. We have access to transportation, accommodation, food, and all the things we need for our daily lives. One by one, all those things became free, so it ended up not making sense for us to own much. First, communication became digitized and free to everyone. Then, when clean energy became free, things started to move quickly. Transportation dropped dramatically in price. It made no sense for us to own cars anymore because we could call a driverless vehicle or a flying car for longer journeys within minutes. We started transporting ourselves in a much more organized and coordinated way when public transport became easier, quicker, and more convenient than the car. Now I can hardly believe that we accepted congestion and traffic jams, not to mention the air pollution from combustion engines. What were we thinking? Sometimes I use my bike when I go to see some of my friends. I enjoy the exercise and the ride. It kind of gets the soul to come along on the journey. Funny how some things seem never to lose their excitement. Walking, biking, cooking, drawing, and growing plants. It makes perfect sense and reminds us of how our culture emerged out of a close relationship with nature. In our city, we don't pay any rent because someone else is using our free space whenever we do not need it. My living room is used for business meetings when I am not there. Once in a while, I will choose to cook for myself. It's easy. The necessary kitchen equipment is delivered at my door within minutes. Since transport became free, we stopped having all those things stuffed into our home. Why keep a pasta maker and a crepe cooker crammed into our cupboards? We can just order them when we need them. This also made the breakthrough of the circular economy easier. When products are turned into services, no one has an interest in things with a short lifespan. Everything is designed for durability, repairability, and recyclability. The materials are flowing more quickly in our economy and can be transformed to new products pretty easily. Environmental problems seem far away since we only use clean energy and clean production methods. The air is clean, the water is clean, and nobody would dare to touch the protected areas of nature because they constitute such value to our well-being. In the cities, we have plenty of green space and plants and trees all over. We still do not understand why in the past we filled all free spots in the city with concrete. And shopping, I can't really remember what that is. For most of us, it has been turned into choosing things to use. Sometimes I find this fun, and sometimes I just want the algorithm to do it for me. It knows my tastes better than I know them by now. When AI and robots took over so much of our work, we suddenly had time to eat well, sleep well, and spend time with other people. The concept of rush hour makes no sense anymore, since the work that we do can now be done at any time. I don't really know if I would call it work anymore. It is more like thinking time, creation time, and development time. For a while, everything was turned into entertainment and people did not want to bother themselves with difficult issues. It was only at the last minute that we found out how to use all these new technologies for better purposes than just killing time. My biggest concern is all the people who do not live in our city. Those we lost on the way. Those who decided that it became too much all this technology, those who felt obsolete and useless when robots and AI took over big parts of our jobs, those who got upset with the political system and turned against it. They lived different kinds of lives outside of the city. Some have formed little self-supporting communities. Others just stayed in the empty and abandoned houses in small 19th century villages. Once in a while, I get annoyed about the fact that I have no real privacy, nowhere I can go and not be registered. I know that somewhere everything I do, think and dream is recorded. I just hope that no one will use it against me. But all in all, it's a good life, much better than the path we were on, where it became so clear that we could not continue with the same model of growth. We had all these terrible things happening: lifestyle diseases, climate change, the refugee crisis, environmental degradation, completely congested cities, water pollution, air pollution, social unrest and unemployment. We lost way too many people before we realized that we could do things differently. Now, of course, the picture painted here is one of a controlling technocratic system run by AI and robots, where owning things is no longer in vogue. Digital systems allow for things to be borrowed, facilities and collected resources to be used. And of course, it's a completely different outlook on growth, but also a completely different outlook on privacy. And it's just worth reflecting on whether this is the sort of society that we want. It's sort of coming top down amongst those large technological players, those large financial services players, and of course those large pan-global organizations that really have very little accountability and very little link with democracy. And that, of course, is the seed behind this concept of the Great Reset. And then if you overlay the digitalization of finance, as I discussed earlier on, perhaps you can see how all the pieces could fall and could fit together. Whether, in fact, we want that or not is a different question. And there was another recent piece from the World Economic Forum titled, "Here's How Businesses Can Be a Platform for Social Change." And they discuss the idea of investing in, engaging and supporting social entrepreneurs who are actively innovating for the good of society, and together identifying new ways to make change-making culture a norm across the private and public sectors. Social entrepreneurs are often tackling unique problems and have game-changing solutions to serving communities. They see the patterns in the field and often innovate to create solutions that empower society to solve issues. This brings a new perspective into corporations and unleashes new innovation pathways and thinking. Change-making culture is rooted in mastering 4 abilities or skills: cognitive empathy, new leadership skills, sophisticated team working, and creative problem solving. In a world of rapid change, complexity and uncertainty, as the pandemic has shown us, change making truly becomes a new literacy and dexterity for all stakeholders in the world: citizens, young people, employees, companies and organizations. Social innovators address the world's most serious challenges, ranging from inequality to girls' education and disaster relief that affects all of us, but in particular vulnerable and excluded groups. To achieve maximum impact and start to address root causes, they need greater visibility, credibility, access to finance, favourable policy decisions, and in some cases a better understanding of global affairs and access to decision makers. It's increasingly clear that business performance depends on how well various stakeholders are served, including communities. This shared journey in turn unleashes skills of the future and empowers humans across the board. A new engagement model, and these relationships are vital to reach a new normal, creating a more equitable, sustainable and just world for all. This model requires a mindset shift where corporations and social entrepreneurs alike are thinking like change makers and creating systems together while attracting more capital to the most pressing challenges in society. So there's some interesting DNA here and some interesting ideas. But I have to say that I come back to this fundamental question. How does this all link to local decision-making and democracy? Or are we going to see these ideas being forced top-down, as advocated by the IMF, as advocated by the World Economic Forum? And my underlying concern is this feels like a centre of gravity which benefits the few, the well-off few, the people who have the financial power to influence what's going on. But I wonder about the impact on ordinary people, everyday people, and whether we want a society that's driven by AI, that's driven by big data, that essentially allows us to do certain things in certain ways and stops us doing other things. The bottom line for me is that it looks to me as though personal freedom and personal privacy is being sacrificed on the altar of some great reset. And I'm not for one convinced that this is actually the right way to go. What I would say finally is that I don't believe there is some grand master conspiracy, some shadowy entity pulling the strings behind the scenes. This is more that there is a like-minded set of thinking sitting amongst large corporations, sitting amongst those in power, and reflecting on how they can get their way into the future. And it is worth remembering that every time there has been a great reset, the few benefit, while the rest are essentially cannon fodder. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.